In the untamed plains of 1870s Nebraska, a story of deadly deception unfolds. Samuel Blackwood rides into the struggling settlement of Mercy Creek with nothing but his wealthy reputation, a heart full of dreams, and saddlebags heavy with gold. What he seeks is simple, a wife to love and a family to cherish. What he doesn't know is that his arrival was anticipated. Behind drawn curtains and in smoky backrooms, the town's corrupt leaders have already sealed his fate, marking him for death. As Samuel helps restore the town's failing Welland courts, the kind-hearted schoolteacher, genuine bonds begin to form. Through acts of generosity and wisdom, he slowly wins over the townsfolk, unknowingly changing the hearts of those tasked with his murder. But will these newfound loyalties be enough to save him when the harvest festival arrives? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Mercy Creek's main street as Samuel Blackwood's stallion kicked up dust with each measured step. His father's gold watch weighed heavy in his vest pocket, its steady ticking a reminder of time's relentless march. At 45, Samuel had finally heeded its call to build something lasting, something more than the fortune he'd amassed in cattle trading. The town before him bore the weathered look of failed dreams. Storefronts that had once gleamed with fresh paint now peeled in the prairie wind. A group of children played marbles in the dirt, their laughter a stark contrast to the somber faces of adults watching from shaded porches. Samuel noted how they studied him, their gazes lingering on his well-tailored coat and polished boots. Outside the general store, Herbert Mason, the town's portly treasurer, straightened his spectacles and nudged Sheriff Wade Clayton. The sheriff's hand instinctively rested on his holster, a gesture that didn't escape Samuel's notice. He'd seen that look before, the mixture of greed and suspicion that often greeted wealth in desperate places. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Samuel called out, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned his place in the world. "I'm seeking Mayor Thompson's office." "End of the street," Clayton replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Can't miss it. Only building with a fresh coat of paint in the last year." The implied criticism of the town's condition hung in the air. Samuel dismounted with the ease of a lifelong horseman, leading his mount to the water trough. The horse's snort of displeasure at the murky water confirmed what he'd observed riding in. The town's well was failing. He'd seen it before in other settlements, how a failing water supply could strangle a community's hopes. The sound of a school bell drew his attention to a modest building set back from the main street. A young woman emerged, shepherding her students toward home. Her dark hair was neatly pinned back, her dress simple but well-maintained. She carried herself with quiet dignity, and when their eyes met briefly across the street, Samuel felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. "That's Miss Sarah Collins," Mason offered suddenly beside him. "Our school teacher. Came out from Boston 2 years ago, far too refined for the likes of most here." The treasurer's tone carried an odd note of possessiveness that made Samuel's jaw tighten. Inside the general store, Samuel noticed the sparse shelves and the town ledger open on the counter. The columns of numbers caught his eye, years of business training making him instinctively analyze the figures. Something wasn't adding up, but he kept his observations to himself. "We don't get many new faces," the shopkeeper, Mrs. Whitaker, said as she wrapped his purchases. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, especially not ones looking to stay. "Times are hard everywhere," Samuel replied diplomatically, "but I see good soil, strong people. Sometimes all a place needs is a fresh start." "Fresh starts come dear," Sheriff Clayton commented from the doorway. "Money has a way of disappearing in these parts." The warning was clear enough, but Samuel had faced down worse threats than a small-town sheriff with a guilty conscience. He collected his packages and stepped back into the fading sunlight, making his way toward the mayor's office. Mayor Thompson's office spoke of privilege amid poverty. The furniture was well oiled, the carpet thick, and a crystal decanter sparkled on a side table. The mayor himself was a study in contradictions. His clothes were expensive but ill-fitting, his manner friendly but eyes cold. "Mr. Blackwood, news of your arrival preceded you." Thompson gestured to a leather chair. "We've heard much about your success in the cattle business, though I must wonder what brings such a prosperous man to our humble town." Samuel settled into the chair, noting how the mayor's desk was positioned to catch the late sunlight, forcing visitors to squint. A small power play, one of many he'd observed since arriving. "I've reached a point in life where success means more than just profits, Mayor Thompson. I'm looking to put down roots, maybe start a family." "Family?" Thompson's surprise seemed genuine. "Well, we're short on eligible ladies of your station, though I noticed you watching Miss Collins earlier." The mayor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's a fine teacher, but perhaps a bit strong-willed for a man seeking a traditional household." Samuel kept his expression neutral, though the mayor's presumption grated. "I've found that strength of will often accompanies strength of character. Now, about purchasing land, I couldn't help but notice the difficulties with your town well." The mayor's smile faltered slightly. "A temporary situation, I assure you. We have plans." "I have experience with well construction," Samuel interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps we could discuss how I might help the town while pursuing my own interests." As the sun set over Mercy Creek, Samuel sat in his room at the boarding house, reviewing his first impressions. The town's corruption was obvious to experienced eyes. The artificial scarcity, the controlled degradation of public resources, the carefully maintained power structure. But beneath that, he'd seen something else. Children playing despite their patched clothes, women sharing what little they had, men still proud enough to nod respectfully to a stranger, and Miss Sarah Collins, whose quiet grace suggested depths worth exploring. Samuel removed his father's watch from his vest, its gold case catching the lamplight. "Well, father," he murmured, "you always said the best investments are in people. Let's see if Mercy Creek's people are worth investing in." Little did he know, at that very moment, his future was being discussed in the back room of the mayor's office, where firelight cast dangerous shadows on calculating faces. Lamplight flickered behind the drawn curtains of Mayor Thompson's office as midnight approached. The town's self-appointed elite gathered around his mahogany desk, their faces ghostly in the uncertain light. Herbert Mason nervously polished his spectacles while Sheriff Clayton stood by the window, watching the empty street below. The air was thick with pipe smoke and unspoken intentions. "Gentlemen," Thompson began, swirling brandy in his crystal glass, "our new arrival presents both an opportunity and a threat. Mr. Blackwood's wealth could solve our financial difficulties." He paused, letting the words sink in. "However, his interest in the well situation is concerning. He's been asking questions at the general store," Mrs. Whitaker added, her usual sharp tone softened by worry. "Examining the ledger when he thought no one was watching. Man has a head for numbers. I'll give him that." Clayton's laugh was without humor. "Numbers can't help him if he has an unfortunate accident. Wouldn't be the first stranger to find these parts dangerous." His hand rested on his holster, a habit that had served him well in the past. "No," Thompson's voice cut through the murmurs of agreement. "Nothing so crude. We need this handled delicately. His death must appear natural, or at least accidental. More importantly, we need access to his accounts first." Mason cleared his throat. "The harvest festival is 6 weeks away. Perfect opportunity. Everyone knows celebration spirits can lead to tragic mistakes." He tried to sound confident, but his hands trembled as he reached for his brandy. The mayor nodded slowly. 6 weeks to win his trust, to guide his investments in a helpful direction. "Clayton, you'll keep watch on him. Mason, find out everything you can about his banking arrangements. Mrs. Whitaker, continue monitoring his purchases and interactions." A soft knock at the door startled them. Sarah Collins stood in the doorway, a letter in her hand. Mayor Thompson, I apologize for the late hour, but you asked to be notified immediately of any response from the Territory Education Board. The conspirators exchanged glances, wondering how long she had been there, what she might have heard. But Sarah's face revealed nothing as she handed over the letter. Thank you, Miss Collins, Thompson said smoothly. You're up late grading papers. Again, I assume. Always more to do, she replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Good evening, everyone. She nodded politely and left, her footsteps fading down the wooden walkway. Can she be trusted? Clayton asked, watching her shadow pass beneath the window. Thompson waved away the concern. She's dependent on her position. Here, besides, she might prove useful. Blackwood seemed quite taken with her today. And she with him, Mrs. Whitaker added, saw her watching him from the schoolhouse. Been here 2 years without showing interest in any man. Now suddenly she's noticing strangers. Perfect, Thompson smiled. A lonely man, a pretty teacher. Nature can take its course while we make our preparations. The meeting continued late into the night, plans being laid like poison beneath the surface of Mercy Creek's daily life. None of them noticed the small envelope that had fallen from Sarah's papers as she left, sliding beneath the mayor's desk. The next morning, Samuel found an anonymous note slipped under his door at the boarding house. The handwriting was elegant, educated. Not all in Mercy Creek are what they seem. Trust your instincts about the well. You're not the first to ask questions. It was signed simply with a sketch of a small flower, columbine, the kind that grew behind the schoolhouse. Samuel tucked the note carefully into his vest pocket, next to his father's watch. Over breakfast he observed his fellow boarders with new attention. Mrs. Henderson, the widow who ran the boarding house, served him extra biscuits with a motherly smile that seemed genuine enough. Settling in all right, Mr. Blackwood? She asked, topping off his coffee. We don't get many men of business staying long-term. Speaking of business, interrupted Reverend Gates from the next table, I heard you mentioned helping with the well situation. Noble intention, but perhaps premature. Mayor Thompson has plans in place. Samuel buttered his biscuit thoughtfully. Plans often benefit from fresh perspectives, Reverend. Sometimes the good Lord sends help in unexpected forms, and sometimes the devil sends temptation dressed as salvation, the Reverend replied sharply, then seemed to catch himself. Not that I'm suggesting, that is, we're grateful for any Christian charity. The warning in the anonymous note seemed more pressing. With each passing hour, after breakfast, Samuel walked the town's perimeter, noting how the failed well had affected different areas. The poorer sections suffered most, their gardens withered, while the mayor's home somehow maintained a green lawn. He was sketching some preliminary plans when Sarah Collins passed by, leading a group of students on a nature walk. Their eyes met briefly, and he noticed how she touched a columbine flower pinned to her collar. Children, she addressed her students, but her voice carried clearly to Samuel. Sometimes the simplest solutions are overlooked because those in power prefer complicated problems. Who can tell me why that might be? A bright-eyed girl raised her hand. Because if the problem stays broken, they can keep saying they're the only ones who can fix it. Very good, Mary, Sarah smiled, then continued down the path, leaving Samuel with much to consider. That evening, Sheriff Clayton made a point of visiting the boarding house. Just checking that our new resident is comfortable, he announced, loudly, but his eyes were sharp as they scanned Samuel's room. And noticed you walking the town borders today, taking quite an interest in our little community. Just stretching my legs, Samuel replied mildly, getting to know my potential neighbors. Neighbors? Clayton's hand again found his holster. Mighty. Presumptuous. Not everyone who passes through Mercy Creek finds it hospitable. After the sheriff left, Samuel examined his door lock carefully. Someone had tried to pick it recently. The marks were fresh. He moved his strongbox to a new hiding place and added a second lock to his door. The game was becoming clearer, but so were the stakes. In the growing darkness, he watched lamplight move between buildings as Mercy Creek's power brokers continued their clandestine meetings. The town ledger's disturbing figures, the suspicious well failure, the two casual warnings, all pieces of a puzzle he was beginning to understand. Patience, he whispered to himself, touching his father's watch. Show your hand too soon, and you'll never see their full game. But as he prepared for bed, he couldn't help wondering if Sarah Collins was a player in this game, or perhaps something else entirely. An ally in a town of enemies. Dawn broke over Mercy Creek to the sound of shovels striking earth. Samuel had begun work on the well project early, his rolled sleeves and willingness to labor alongside hired workers drawing curious onlookers. The carefully drawn blueprint lay protected beneath a wooden crate, its precise measurements and innovative design representing hope for the dying town. "Never seen a rich man dig before," young Tommy Henderson commented, watching from the edge of the worksite. His mother, the boarding house owner, had sent him with a pitcher of water for the workers. "Ma says you're different than the last fellow who promised to help." Samuel paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Oh, what happened to him?" "Don't rightly know," Tommy shrugged. "Just disappeared one night. Sheriff said he must have moved on, but he left all his things behind." From her schoolhouse steps, Sarah Collins observed the exchange while her students practiced their letters. She noticed how Samuel took time to explain the well's mechanics to Tommy, treating the boy's questions with genuine respect. It stirred memories of her own father, an engineer whose passion for teaching had inspired her career choice. Later that morning, Sarah approached the worksite during her students' lunch break. "Mr. Blackwood, might I trouble you for a moment?" She held up a leather-bound book. "I'm teaching the children about water systems, and your project provides a perfect practical example." Samuel recognized the invitation for what it was, a chance to talk away from prying eyes. They walked to a shaded area where Sarah opened her book, revealing detailed notes about the town's water problems that went well beyond academic interest. "The well's failure wasn't natural," she said softly, pointing to what appeared to be lesson plans. "I've been tracking water levels since I arrived. The decline was too sudden, too localized. Sabotage." Samuel kept his voice low, conscious of Sheriff Clayton watching from across the street. "I suspect the previous well was intentionally contaminated. It keeps the town dependent on water rights controlled by certain parties." Her fingers traced a diagram that could have been mistaken for a teaching aid. But proving it, their conversation was interrupted by Mayor Thompson's arrival. He carried his own rolled papers, a competing well proposal that Samuel recognized as deliberately inefficient. "Mr. Blackwood, I see you've begun without waiting for official approval." Thompson's smile was stiff. "And Miss Collins, shouldn't you be attending to your students?" "Actually, Mayor, Miss Collins was helping me understand the educational opportunities this project presents." Samuel smoothly intervened. "I'm considering funding some new science equipment for the school. Children learning about hydraulics today might build better wells tomorrow." The mayor's expression flickered between greed and suspicion. The offer of school funding was tempting, but the idea of educated citizens made him visibly uncomfortable. "Very generous, though perhaps premature until we've reviewed all proposals." "Of course," Samuel agreed easily. "I'm just preparing the ground for now. Proper foundations are essential, wouldn't you say, Miss Collins?" Sarah met his eyes with quiet understanding. "Essential indeed, Mr. Blackwood. The children are learning that very lesson in today's geology study." As Sarah returned to her students, Samuel noticed how the mayor watched her leave, calculation evident in his gaze. The interaction confirmed his growing suspicions about the power dynamics in Mercy Creek. The work continued through the afternoon. Samuel made a show of consulting Thompson's proposals while actually implementing his own superior design. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to handle corrupt officials was to let them believe they were in control. Around 3 o'clock, a commotion drew everyone's attention. Little Mary, Sarah's bright student from the nature walk, had fallen into one of the excavation pits. Samuel reached her first, descending quickly but carefully into the hole. You hurt, child?" he asked, checking for injuries. Mary shook her head, though tears streaked her dusty cheeks. "I was trying to see the water table marks you told Tommy about." Samuel helped her out, aware of how the incident had drawn a crowd. Sarah rushed over, her face pale with concern. Behind her, Sheriff Clayton and Herbert Mason exchanged meaningful glances. "Dangerous business, all this digging," Clayton commented loudly. "Accidents happen so easily on construction sites." The threat was clear, but it had an unintended effect. As Samuel cleaned a small scrape on Mary's knee with supplies from Sarah's first aid kit, parents in the crowd began whispering about his quick response and gentle care. Here was a wealthy man who didn't hesitate to jump into a dirty hole to help a child, a sharp contrast to their current leadership. "Perhaps we should postpone further work until proper safety measures are in place," Thompson suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. "Already handled, Mayor," Samuel responded, pointing to the arrival of wooden barriers and warning signs he'd ordered. "Safety is always my first concern. I believe you'll find the specifications in the proposals I submitted this morning." That evening, as Samuel reviewed his progress, a soft knock at his door revealed Mrs. Henderson with a covered dinner tray. "From several of us," she said quietly. "Not everyone in town is against progress, Mr. Blackwood." The meal was simple but well prepared, and more importantly, represented a shift in the town's dynamics. Samuel added the list of contributing families. Mrs. Henderson had slipped him to his growing collection of crucial information. Later, preparing for bed, he found another note had been delivered with his clean laundry. "The Harvest Festival Committee meets tomorrow. They plan something beyond their usual schemes. Be careful." The familiar Columbine sketch accompanied the warning. Samuel stood at his window, watching the night settle over Mercy Creek. The well project was more than just clean water. It was becoming a symbol of change, a test of the town's character. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he allowed himself to feel cautiously optimistic. His father's watch ticked steadily on the bedside table, its rhythm matching the distant sound of Sarah Collins playing hymns on the schoolhouse piano. Two reputable people in a corrupt town, each fighting in their own way for something better. Samuel smiled slightly, remembering Tommy's innocent questions and Mary's curiosity about the water table. Sometimes, he reflected, the strongest foundations were built not of concrete and stone, but of trust and shared purpose. The question was, how many hearts would change before his enemies made their move? The Harvest Festival Committee meeting had just concluded when Samuel noticed the corner of a document protruding from beneath a stack of old permits in the town hall's records room. He'd been reviewing construction regulations, or so he'd told. The clerk. The deed's aged parchment caught the late afternoon light, its official seals partially obscured by dust. Mining rights. The document detailed mineral claims extending far beyond Mercy Creek's boundaries, all controlled by a consortium led by familiar names: Thompson, Clayton, Mason. The dates caught his eye. The claims preceded the town's founding. Mercy Creek hadn't been built here by chance. It had been deliberately established atop valuable deposits, its water supply positioned to control access to underground resources. "Find anything interesting?" Sarah's voice startled him. She stood in the doorway, her shadow long against the wooden floor. "I often research here after school hours. Amazing what history can tell us, isn't it?" Samuel carefully slid the deed back into place. "History has many layers in Mercy Creek, it seems, like the geological strata beneath our feet." My father would have appreciated that comparison. Sarah moved closer, her voice dropping. "He was a mining engineer. Came through here 6 years ago before I arrived. Made some interesting observations about the local geology." She paused, emotion flickering across her face. "He disappeared shortly after writing to me about his discoveries." The pieces clicked into place. Her presence in Mercy Creek wasn't random. She was searching for answers about her father's fate. Samuel studied her with new understanding, noting the strength beneath her gentle exterior. "The well project threatens them more than we initially thought," he said quietly. "Clean water means independent farmers, new settlers, development they can't control, and questions about what's beneath the soil." Sarah glanced toward the door. "They're planning something at the Harvest Festival. I heard Mason talking about special arrangements with the bank." Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Herbert Mason appeared, his round face flushed from climbing the stairs. "Miss Collins, Mr. Blackwood." Such dedication to research on a beautiful afternoon. His attempt at joviality couldn't mask his suspicious glare. "Just reviewing safety protocols," Samuel replied smoothly. "Miss Collins was helping me understand local building traditions. Did you know she's quite knowledgeable about architectural history?" Mason's smile tightened. "Indeed. Well, don't let me interrupt your studies." He lingered, making a show of organizing papers while watching them. In the reflection of a dusty window, Sarah gathered her books. "I should check on Mary. She's still shaken from yesterday's fall." At the door, she turned back. "Oh, Mr. Blackwood, you might find the records from 1869 particularly enlightening. Such dramatic changes in the town's fortune that year." After she left, Mason cleared his throat. "Charming woman, our Miss Collins, though perhaps too curious for her own good. Tragic about her father. Wanderlust can be dangerous in these parts." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Samuel kept his expression neutral, but his hand instinctively moved to his father's watch. "Indeed, though I've found that the truth has a way of surfacing, Mr. Mason, like water finding its level." That evening, Samuel was reviewing his notes when a commotion erupted outside. One of the support beams for the well project had collapsed, nearly crushing 2 workers. The accident showed signs of deliberate tampering, saw marks on the wood, ropes partially cut. Sheriff Clayton arrived quickly, almost too quickly. "Dangerous business, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps you should reconsider your investment in our little town." "Perhaps," Samuel agreed mildly. "I should hire additional security. Can't be too careful with such valuable equipment." He noted how Clayton's hand twitched toward his holster at the suggestion of outside witnesses. As the crowd dispersed, Samuel spotted young Tommy Henderson lingering nearby. The boy's expression suggested he had something to share, but was afraid to speak openly. Samuel made a show of checking his pocket watch. "Tommy, would you run to the schoolhouse and ask Miss Collins if she still has that book on construction? Safety, best to review procedures after an incident like this." The boy returned not only with a book, but with a folded note hidden inside. "They're moving faster than expected. Mason visited the bank in Sterling City yesterday. Something about transfer arrangements. Be careful with your evening coffee. Mrs. Whitaker has been asking unusual questions about your drinking habits." Samuel skipped his evening coffee at the boarding house, noticing Mrs. Whitaker's poorly concealed disappointment. Instead, he spent the evening on his balcony, watching the town's nighttime movements. Sarah's lamp burned late in the schoolhouse, as she presumably graded papers, though he suspected she was conducting her own investigation. A coded message arrived the next morning with his shaving supplies. "Mining company representatives arriving next week. Thompson plans to delay well. Completion until after their visit. Watch for new regulations." The morning also brought an unexpected visitor, Reverend Gates, looking uncomfortable in the early heat. "Mr. Blackwood, might we speak privately? It concerns matters of conscience." Inside Samuel's room, the Reverend twisted his hat nervously. "I've been complicit in... That is, I've turned a blind eye to certain activities, believing it served the greater good. But your presence here, your genuine desire to help..." He swallowed hard. "There are things you should know about Sarah's father." Before he could continue, a shriek pierced the morning calm. They rushed outside to find Mary sprawled at the bottom of the schoolhouse steps, clutching her ankle. Sarah knelt beside her, face pale but composed. "The step was loose," Mary whimpered. "It wasn't loose yesterday." Samuel examined the step while Sarah tended to Mary. The wood had been deliberately weakened from beneath. A warning to Sarah, using her student to deliver the message. Meeting Sarah's eyes over Mary's bowed head, Samuel saw not fear, but determination. She gave him a slight nod, acknowledging their shared understanding. Their enemies were escalating, becoming desperate. That afternoon, Samuel added new notes to his growing file of evidence. The mining deeds details, the pattern of accidents, the Reverend's unfinished confession. The corruption in Mercy Creek ran deeper than simple greed. It was built into the town's very foundations. His father's watch marked the passing hours as he planned his next move. The harvest festival was approaching, and with it would come either Mercy Creek's salvation or his own carefully planned demise. Much depended on whom he could trust, and how many of the townspeople would stand with him when the truth finally emerged. In the gathering dusk, he watched Sarah escort Mary home, the schoolteacher's straight spine and steady pace revealing her character. They were alike, he realized, both pursuing justice while maintaining a careful facade of routine. But how many others in Mercy Creek would choose justice over safety when the moment of truth arrived? By candlelight, Sarah Collins penned her latest journal entry, her careful handwriting betraying only the slightest tremor. September 15th, 1875. The pieces of Father's puzzle finally align. Today, I discovered why Thompson was so eager to offer me the teaching position 2 years ago. They needed someone to blame if their plans went awry. Who better than the daughter of the man they silenced? But they miscalculated. Education brings light to darkness, as Father always said. Samuel Blackwood sees more than he reveals. His well project has exposed not just the corruption of our water supply, but the rot at Mercy Creek's heart. The mining rights he found confirm Father's suspicions. What they did to him. I must be careful, yet I cannot stand idle. A floorboard creaked outside her small room above the schoolhouse. Sarah quietly closed the journal, sliding it into its hiding place behind a loose brick in the fireplace. The footsteps passed, but their message was clear. She was being watched. Morning brought an unusually large attendance to her class. Several town council members had suddenly developed an interest in education, their children appearing for the first time in weeks. Sarah adapted her lesson accordingly. "Today we'll discuss water systems in ancient Rome," she announced, catching Samuel's eye as he passed by the open window. "How engineering either serves the public good or becomes a tool of control." Herbert Mason's son shifted uncomfortably. "Pa says some folks don't understand the complexities of water management." "Perhaps," Sarah replied smoothly, "we should examine those complexities together." She began drawing diagrams that bore a striking resemblance to Samuel's well-design, explaining principles that highlighted the flaws in the town's current system. By noon, Samuel had positioned the last support beam for the well's main structure. The work drew a crowd, including Mayor Thompson and Sheriff Clayton. The tension was palpable as Samuel demonstrated the improved pumping mechanism. "Quite impressive," Thompson offered with false warmth. "Though I'm concerned about the expense, the town council will need to review the cost implications." "Already handled," Samuel responded, producing documents from his vest. "Private funding, properly notarized. The well will belong to the town, operated as a public resource." Clayton stepped forward, hand resting on his holster. "Public resources require public oversight, Blackwood. We have regulations, which I've studied thoroughly," Samuel interrupted, "including some interesting amendments dating back to 1869. Miss Collins has been most helpful in researching local ordinances." The mayor's face darkened. "Miss Collins seems to have expanded beyond her teaching duties." "Knowledge serves many purposes," Sarah spoke up, having approached during the exchange. "My students are quite fascinated by the historical aspects of water rights in the West." The confrontation drew more onlookers. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the boarding house, bringing water for the workers. Other townspeople lingered, sensing the significance of the moment. "Perhaps," Thompson said coldly, "we should discuss the school's curriculum at the next council meeting. Ensure it meets appropriate standards." "Excellent idea," Samuel interjected. "I've been meaning to propose additional funding for science education. The children show remarkable aptitude for engineering principles." The threat to Sarah's position hung in the air, but something had changed. Parents in the crowd murmured supportively. Their children's newfound enthusiasm for learning had not gone unnoticed. That evening, Sarah added to her journal, "The battle." Lines are drawn more clearly now. Samuel's public challenge has forced Thompson's hand. But the sheriff's expression worried me. "I've seen that cold look before, in the days before Father disappeared. Must warn Samuel about the back trail behind the church. That's where they—" A knock interrupted her writing. Through the door's window, she recognized Samuel's silhouette. Quickly hiding the journal, she admitted him. "Miss Collins," he began formally, aware they might be overheard. "I wanted to thank you for your assistance with the historical research." "Of course," she replied, matching his tone. Moving to adjust a lamp, she deliberately knocked her lesson book to the floor. As they both bent to retrieve it, she whispered, "They're planning to enforce an old ordinance about unmarried women. Teaching tomorrow's council meeting." Samuel's expression didn't change as he straightened, but his hand brushed hers reassuringly. "Perhaps you'd be interested in some books on modern educational methods? I have several in my room." The invitation to talk privately was clear. Later, in Samuel's carefully secured room, they spoke more freely. "They're scared," Samuel observed, showing her a new anonymous threat he'd received. "The well project is nearly complete, and they can't stop it without revealing their methods." "It's not just the well," Sarah explained, sharing what she'd overwritten in her journal. "The mining company representatives are due next week. They need to maintain control of the water rights to force the sale of adjacent properties." A soft tap at the door revealed Tommy Henderson with fresh towels, and another warning. "Ma says Sheriff Clayton was asking about your evening routine, Mr. Blackwood, and some strangers checked into the hotel in Sterling City." After Tommy left, Samuel and Sarah exchanged grave looks. "Hired guns," she said softly. "Like the ones who—" She couldn't finish. "We'll need proof," Samuel said, studying his father's watch thoughtfully. "The harvest festival gives us 3 days. Can you trust your students to carry messages?" "The children know more than the adults realize. Mary's already organized a warning system using chalk marks on the fence posts." Their planning was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass downstairs, followed by shouts about a fire in the stables. As Samuel rushed to help, Sarah slipped away through the back stairs, pausing only to leave a new note in their predetermined hiding spot. The fire was contained quickly, too quickly, suggesting it was meant as a distraction. Samuel returned to find his room ransacked, though the intruders had missed his most important documents, hidden in a compartment beneath the floorboards. Later that night, he watched from his window as Sarah's lamp burned late again. The schoolhouse had become a beacon of sorts. Much like the well was becoming a symbol of change. Both represented hope for Mercy Creek's future, and both had made their creators targets. Tomorrow would bring the council meeting and new threats to Sarah's position. But something had shifted in the town's atmosphere. The people of Mercy Creek were beginning to whisper among themselves, to question the patterns of control they'd accepted for so long. Samuel checked his father's watch one last time before retiring. If Sarah's journal was correct about the back trail behind the church, they were finally close to uncovering the truth about her father's disappearance. The question was whether they could expose it before history repeated itself. The harvest festival plans lay spread across Mayor Thompson's desk, each detail carefully crafted to conceal its deadly purpose. The layout marked the locations of lanterns, food stalls, and most importantly, the designated spot where Samuel Blackwood would meet his end. The mayor traced the path with his finger, visualizing how it would unfold. "The dancing will be here," he explained to his conspirators, "near the new well. When the crowd is thickest, Clayton's men will start a commotion. In the confusion, Blackwood will be guided toward the storage shed. A tragic accident with falling crates, witnesses too distracted to see clearly. Outside the window, children hung colorful banners across the street, their excitement about the upcoming celebration a sharp contrast to the dark plotting within. Sarah watched them from the schoolhouse steps, her heart heavy with the knowledge hidden in their innocent decorations. "Miss Collins," Mary called out, waving a sketch, "we finished the banner design you suggested." The parchment showed not just festival decorations, but carefully coded positions of lookouts and escape routes, disguised as childish doodles. "Beautiful work," Sarah praised, noting how the girl had cleverly marked the dangerous spots with subtle crosses. Her students had become unwitting allies in this deadly game, their youth providing perfect cover for passing information. Samuel appeared at the well, ostensibly checking the final installations. "The children have quite an artistic touch," he commented, studying the banner design, "though some of these marks seem oddly placed." "Children see things differently," Sarah replied meaningfully. "They notice patterns adults often miss." Their conversation was interrupted by Herbert Mason, huffing as he crossed the street. "Festival committee needs final approval on the layout," he announced, brandishing official-looking papers. "Some concerns about crowd management." Samuel took the documents, recognizing them as a version of the plans he'd glimpsed in Thompson's office. "Safety first, of course. I'd be happy to review these with the committee." "That won't be necessary," Mason said quickly. "Just sign your approval. As the well's benefactor, you understand." "I understand many things, Mr. Mason." Samuel's tone was pleasant but firm, including the importance of proper oversight. "Perhaps we should discuss this at tomorrow's town meeting." Mason's face reddened. "Some matters are better handled privately." "Privacy has its place," Samuel agreed, "but so does public accountability." "Speaking of which, Miss Collins, I believe you had some suggestions about the educational displays." Sarah stepped forward, producing her own papers. "Yes, the children are preparing demonstrations about water systems and local geology. Quite enlightening topics." Mason nearly choked at the word geology, his complexion turning from red to pale. "Surely the festival isn't an appropriate venue for academic matters." "Knowledge enriches every occasion," Sarah replied smoothly. "The mining company representatives attending might find it particularly interesting." The mention of the mining company sent Mason scurrying back to report to Thompson. Once he was gone, Samuel lowered his voice. "The plans confirm our suspicions. They've arranged everything to ensure no witnesses near the storage shed." Sarah nodded grimly. "Mary's father works there. He overheard them discussing rope quality yesterday, testing which types break most convincingly under strain." Throughout the day, the festival preparations continued their dual nature, cheerful on the surface, deadly underneath. Women arranged flower displays that would mark safe paths through the coming chaos. Men built stalls positioned to provide cover or escape routes. Sheriff Clayton supervised it all, his badge glinting as menacingly as his gun. "Quite an operation you're running, Blackwood," he commented, watching Samuel inspect the well's final. "Fittings. Shame if anything went wrong at the celebration." "Everything has been carefully tested," Samuel replied, matching the sheriff's tone, "including the support beams. Interesting how rope quality varies, isn't it?" Clayton's hand twitched toward his holster. "Some tests are more final than others." As evening approached, Sarah gathered her students for one last rehearsal of their festival performances. Each song and dance contained coded warnings and signals, practiced until they became natural. "Remember, children," she instructed, "timing is crucial in any performance." Little Tommy Henderson lingered after the others left. "Pa says bad men came from Sterling City today. They're staying at the old Miller place out by the creek." Samuel added this information to his mental map of the conspiracy. The hired guns would provide backup if the accident didn't go as planned, but their presence also meant Thompson wasn't fully confident in his scheme. That night, Samuel met secretly with Reverend Gates in the church. The Reverend's conscience had finally won out over his fear. "They used the same storage shed before," Gates whispered, glancing nervously at the shadows. "Sarah's father, he found documents about the mining claims, thought he could expose them legally. They made it look like he ran away, but he swallowed hard. The graves behind the old oak unmarked." Samuel placed a reassuring hand on the trembling man's shoulder. "Your testimony could end this." "They'll kill me too," Gates protested. "Not if we time everything correctly. The festival gives us cover to position allies." As Samuel walked back to the boarding house, he noted more strangers in town, rough-looking, men who didn't meet his eyes. The noose was tightening, but so was his own plan. Sarah's lamp burned late again, but tonight she wasn't alone. Mrs. Henderson and several other townswomen were there, ostensibly planning festival refreshments. In reality, they were organizing their own resistance, preparing for the moment when they would have to choose sides. "The well water runs clear now," Mrs. Henderson observed, her meaning clear. Time the truth did too. Samuel checked his father's watch before bed, thinking how its steady ticking matched the countdown to the festival. 2 days remained. In that time, either justice would prevail, or he and Sarah would join her father in an unmarked grave. He caught a glimpse of Sarah at her window, pinning a fresh columbine to her shawl. Their eyes met briefly across the darkened street. Everything was in place: the children's warnings, the townspeople's secret support, the evidence of years of corruption. But would it be enough to overcome decades of fear and control? The Harvest Festival banners fluttered in the night breeze, their hidden messages waiting to be deployed. Beneath them, 2 kinds of preparations continued, one for celebration, one for murder. Soon, Mercy Creek would have to choose which future it truly wanted. The yellowed newspaper clippings spread across Samuel's desk told a story of systematic corruption spanning 15 years, each seemingly unrelated article, carefully preserved by Sarah's father, formed part of a damning pattern: mysterious disappearances, sudden property transfers, accidents that prove suspiciously profitable. Sterling City investor missing after well dispute, 1860. Local rancher abandons property following water rights controversy, 1863. Mining surveyor vanishes in Nebraska territory, 1869. Mercy Creek celebrates new leadership, 1870. Samuel had spent the night piecing together the timeline, matching dates with the town ledger's suspicious entries. The story they told turned his stomach. Thompson and his conspirators hadn't just killed Sarah's father, they'd been systematically eliminating threats to their control for over a decade. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, hand moving to his hidden revolver. Mrs. Henderson entered, carrying not breakfast but a stack of old letters. "Found these in my late husband's things," she said quietly. "He was town clerk before his hunting accident. Never believed it was really an accident." The letters revealed her husband had been gathering evidence just like Sarah's father. His accident had occurred the day after he'd requested official mining claim records from the territorial office. "Why show me these now?" Samuel asked gently. The widow's face hardened. "Because my Tommy came home yesterday talking about geology lessons and water tables, same things that got his father killed. I won't lose my son to these monsters." There. Conversation was interrupted by rapid footsteps on the stairs. Young Mary burst in, out of breath. "Miss Collins says to warn you. Strange men watching the school. They ask questions about her father." Samuel quickly concealed the evidence. "Thank you, Mary. Tell Miss Collins," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell her the geology lesson was most illuminating." After they left, Samuel cross-referenced the dates of the disappearances with entries from the town ledger. Each victim had been replaced by someone in Thompson's circle. Mason taking over as treasurer, Clayton becoming sheriff, Thompson himself ascending to mayor. A new knock, this time revealing Reverend Gates, looking more haunted than usual. "Mr. Blackwood, I've been wrestling with my conscience. There's something you need to see." The Reverend led him to the church's records room, pulling out the parish registry. "I've kept a separate record," he explained, hands trembling as he revealed a hidden compartment in the binding. "Dates, names, suspicious deaths. I thought recording it might ease my guilt." The hidden pages contained details that filled crucial gaps: witnesses who'd been paid off, official causes of death, carefully constructed alibis. The Reverend had documented it all, his pastoral visits providing perfect cover for gathering information. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Gates slumped in shame. "They threatened my sister's family in Sterling City. But now," he straightened, "now I see silence kills as surely as violence. Your well project Miss Collins is teaching. You're giving people hope. That's more dangerous to Thompson than any evidence." As if to confirm his words, a commotion erupted outside. One of the new well's support beams had mysteriously collapsed, nearly crushing a group of children. But this time was different. Townspeople were openly questioning the accident. "Saw one of Clayton's men near that beam earlier," a farmer declared loudly. "Mighty suspicious timing." Samuel noticed how the crowd's mood had shifted. Fear still existed, but it was mixed with anger now. The conspirators' control was slipping. Sarah appeared at his elbow, ostensibly checking for injuries. "The mining company representatives arrived early," she whispered. "They're meeting Thompson. Now, something about finalizing contracts before the festival." A messenger boy ran up with a note for Samuel, an invitation to join the meeting. Thompson was either extending an olive branch or setting a trap. "Go," Sarah advised, reading his expression. "But first you should know. I found my father's final report. It's hidden in my mother's old music box. If anything happens—" Samuel squeezed her hand briefly. "Nothing will happen. The truth protects itself once enough people choose to see it." The meeting in Thompson's office revealed the conspirators' growing desperation. The mining company representatives, hard-faced men with expensive suits and calloused hands, were demanding immediate action. "We've invested too much to wait," their leader growled. "Either secure the additional water rights by the festival, or our arrangement ends." Thompson's forced smile barely masked his panic. "Mr. Blackwood, so glad you could join us. We were just discussing the festival preparations." "And water rights," Samuel added pleasantly. "Fascinating subject. I've been researching local history recently. Amazing how many past investors disappeared before claiming their stakes." The mining representative's eyes narrowed. "Disappeared? Tragic accidents, all of them," Clayton cut in smoothly. "Nature can be harsh in these parts." "Indeed." Samuel withdrew his father's watch, its gold case catching the light. "Reminds me of a story my father told about crooked land dealers back east. Used to arrange accidents too, until a circuit judge connected the patterns. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke." Thompson's face hardened. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion at the festival, Mr. Blackwood. I hear the storage shed will have an interesting display." Leaving the office, Samuel passed Herbert Mason in the hallway. The treasurer looked ill, sweat beading on his forehead. Their eyes met, and Samuel recognized the look of a man reaching his breaking point. "My boy," Mason whispered, so softly Samuel nearly missed it. "They're using my boy to keep me quiet. But he's your student now, asking questions I can't answer." Samuel had found his weak link in the conspiracy. "Knowledge frees us all, Mr. Mason, even from our own choices." That evening, as festival preparations entered their final phase, Samuel added Mason's confession to his growing collection of evidence. Sarah's father's final report, Mrs. Henderson's letters, the Reverend's secret records, the damning newspaper trail. Together they painted a picture not even the territorial authorities could ignore. But first, they had to survive the festival. Samuel watched from his window as Clayton's hired guns patrolled the streets, no longer bothering to hide their presence. Thompson had abandoned subtlety for intimidation. Sarah's lamp still burned in the schoolhouse, but tonight it seemed less lonely. Other lights flickered across town. In the church, the boarding house, farmers' homes, small beacons of resistance, growing stronger as the truth spread. Samuel checked his father's watch one last time before retiring. Tomorrow would begin the festival's final preparations. By its end, Mercy Creek would either find its redemption or claim 2 more victims in its tragic history. The day before the harvest festival dawned with an eerie calm. Amidst the bustling preparations, a silver badge lay on Samuel's dresser, delivered anonymously in the night. It had belonged to the territory marshal who'd begun investigating Sarah's father's disappearance before his own tragic accident on the Sterling City Road. The badge's tarnished surface reflected more than just age. It mirrored the corruption it had failed to stop. Samuel studied the festival grounds from his window, watching the careful choreography below. Clayton's men positioned themselves at key points, their practiced movements betraying military training. These weren't common thugs. Thompson had hired experienced killers. Sarah's students wandered the grounds in pairs, playing children's games that just happened to test sightlines and timing between various stalls. Mary and Tommy led these innocent reconnaissance missions, their chalk marks appearing on fences and walls in a code only the conspirators' guilty consciences could recognize. "Quite a show they're putting on," Mrs. Henderson commented, bringing Samuel's morning coffee. She'd taken to testing his drinks personally since the poisoning attempt. Though some of the players seem uncertain of their roles, she was right. Herbert Mason stood amid the preparations, his usual officious manner replaced by nervous glances between his son, engrossed in chalk marking with the other children, and the hired guns watching from the shadows. Samuel took his coffee to the porch, making a show of reviewing the festival layout. Sarah passed by with her students, conducting a rehearsal for tomorrow's performances. Their eyes met briefly as she adjusted her shawl, revealing a flash of paper tucked into her sleeve. Later, in the relative privacy of the schoolhouse, they read Mason's hurriedly scrawled confession together. The treasurer's breaking point had finally come, spurred by his son's innocent questions about missing town records. "They're planning to trigger the accident when the children's choir performs," Sarah read, her voice tight. "The noise will cover, dear God, they're going to collapse the entire storage shed." "With everyone inside," Samuel finished grimly. "Make it look like structural failure. Take out anyone who might talk." He touched the marshal's badge in his pocket. They've done it before. A floorboard creaked outside. They turned to find Reverend Gates, his face ashen. "Sheriff Clayton is gathering men behind the church. They're digging." The implication was clear. They were preparing graves in advance. The conspirators weren't just planning murder. They were anticipating a massacre. Samuel shared a look with Sarah. "Time to play our hand. Get word to Mrs. Henderson. Tell her to activate the Widows' Network." Throughout the afternoon, the town's routine took on a surreal quality. Women exchanged recipes that contained coded warnings. Children played games that positioned lookouts. Even the festival decorations served double duty, their placement marking escape routes and safe zones. In the general store, Mrs. Whitaker watched Samuel examine supplies with suspicious eyes. "Looking for anything special, Mr. Blackwood?" "Just some rope," he replied pleasantly. "Though I hear quality varies. Some types break under strain more easily than others." The shopkeeper's face paled as she realized he knew about the sabotaged ropes intended for the storage shed. Behind her, the town ledger lay open, its damning figures now a testimony to years of theft and murder. Outside, Thompson supervised the final preparations with obvious strain. The mining company representative's demands had forced his hand, pushing the timetable faster than he'd planned. Samuel noted how the mayor's forced joviality cracked whenever he glanced at the well, the symbol of change he couldn't control. "Everything ready for tomorrow's demonstration," Thompson called out with false heartiness. "Shame if technical difficulties disrupted the celebration. The demonstration will be memorable." Samuel assured him, letting his coat fall open to reveal his father's watch chain. Some might even call it revolutionary. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to Samuel's room, each adding pieces to the resistance. Mrs. Henderson reported that every widow in town, and there were many, had agreed to help. Their husbands' suspicious deaths had created an army of silent witnesses, finally ready to speak. Reverend Gates provided church records documenting land transfers after each accident, while his sister smuggled similar evidence from Sterling City. The paper trail was becoming impossible to ignore. Even the mining company representatives seemed unsettled. Samuel observed them arguing with Thompson behind the hotel, their gestures suggesting growing doubts about their partnership. As dusk approached, Sarah gathered her most trusted students for final instructions. "Remember," she told them, "tomorrow's performance is about more than music. It's about justice." The children's solemn nods reflected their understanding. They'd grown up under Thompson's shadow, watching their parents bow to corruption. Tomorrow offered a chance to help end it. Samuel's evening reconnaissance revealed the conspirators' final preparations. Clayton's men had positioned weapons behind festival stalls. Ropes and support beams had been carefully weakened. The trap was set, but so was the counter-trap. Mason's confession was safely delivered to trusted hands in Sterling City. The widow's network had established a signal system that would spread word of any violence within minutes. Most importantly, the townspeople's fear was turning to determination. In his room, Samuel cleaned his father's revolver. A last resort he prayed wouldn't be needed. The marshal's badge caught the lamplight, reminding him of all those who died trying to expose the truth. Sarah's lamp still burned in the schoolhouse, but tonight it was joined by dozens of others across town. Small lights in windows, each representing a citizen who'd chosen to stand against corruption. A final note arrived via Tommy Henderson. "Storage shed foundations weakened on east side. They plan to blame structural flaws in your well design. Mining company getting nervous. Overheard them discussing cutting ties if anything goes wrong." Samuel added it to his evidence collection, then checked his father's watch. In 12 hours, the harvest festival would begin. By its end, Mercy Creek would either find its redemption or add more names to its tragic legacy. Outside, the autumn wind carried the sound of Clayton's men making their final preparations. But it also carried something else: whispered conversations between neighbors, prayers from the church, children's voices practicing their coded songs. The town itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which future it would choose. Tomorrow would test not just Samuel's plans, but the very soul of Mercy Creek. In the deepening twilight of Festival Eve, Samuel found Sarah's grandfather's prayer book placed carefully on his pillow, a final warning wrapped in devotion. Inside, familiar handwriting traced a desperate message across the margins of Psalm 23. "They know about the evidence. Clayton's men have orders to shoot if you're seen near the storage shed. Please, if there's any way to delay." But delay meant more victims, more corrupt triumphs, more unmarked graves behind the church. Samuel returned the prayer book to Sarah via Tommy Henderson, adding his own note: "Faith without works is dead." The boarding house creaked with unusual activity. Boots on the stairs, whispered conversations, the subtle sounds of a town choosing sides. Mrs. Henderson moved through the halls like a general reviewing troops, her widow's black dress a battle flag for justice. "Marshal's office in Sterling City received Mason's confession," she murmured while delivering fresh towels. "But Clayton's men are watching the roads. Help won't arrive until after the festival begins." Samuel nodded, understanding the implications. "They would face the crucial hours alone. How many women in your network?" 23 widows, she replied grimly, each with a reason to see Thompson fall. "We'll be ready." A knock at his door revealed Reverend Gates, clutching his collar. Like a lifeline. "Sheriff Clayton is looking for you, says he has one last chance to discuss festival security." "Then we shouldn't keep him waiting." Samuel checked his father's watch, the steady ticking a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually end. He found Clayton in the sheriff's office, boots on his desk, malice in his smile. Last chance, Blackwood. Stages leaving for Sterling. City at dawn. Be on it, and abandon my investment in the town's future. Clayton's smile vanished. Ain't no future here for dead men. Ask Sarah Collins' father, if you can find what's left of him. Interesting choice of words, Sheriff. Planning to add to your collection of unmarked graves. The sheriff's hand dropped to his gun, but Samuel was already moving, his casual stance concealing ready muscles. Careful, Samuel warned softly. Wouldn't want to start the festivities early. Later, watching from his window, Samuel observed the final pieces being positioned. Clayton's hired guns lounged in shadows, wearing their violence like Sunday clothes. Thompson paced his office, silhouetted against lamplight, his ambition finally overreaching his caution. But there were other movements too. Widows walking their evening routes, passing information in bread baskets and sewing bags. Children playing their last games of the day, marking safe paths with colored chalk. Sarah's lamp burning in the schoolhouse, a beacon of resilience. Samuel touched the marshal's badge in his pocket, thinking of all who had died trying to bring justice to Mercy Creek. Tomorrow would test not just courage, but the power of truth against entrenched evil. In the growing darkness, he made his final preparations. Evidence secured, escape routes memorized, allies positioned. Whatever happened at the festival, Thompson's corruption would end. The night settled over Mercy Creek like a held breath. Tomorrow would bring either deliverance or death, justice or tragedy. Samuel checked his father's watch one last time, its steady ticking counting down to destiny. In the street below, Sarah walked home from the schoolhouse, her straight spine defying fear. Their eyes met briefly across the darkness. No words were needed. They had chosen their path, accepted its consequences. The harvest festival would begin with the rising sun, bringing with it a harvest of long-planted seeds, justice, revenge, redemption. The only question was, which would take root in Mercy Creek's bloody soil? The Harvest Festival banner stretched. Across Mercy Creek's main street, its cheerful colors masking darker intentions. Celebrating community and prosperity, proclaimed the hand-painted letters, while hidden marks along its edges signaled watchful eyes. 3 red flowers for danger at the storage shed. 2 bluebirds for Clayton's men by the well. A winding vine marking the safest escape route. Dawn brought the smell of baking pies and the metallic click of hidden weapons being checked. Women in their festival best carried baskets lined with ammunition alongside fresh bread. Children ran errands that just happened to position them as lookouts. Their innocent games, a cover for serious surveillance. Samuel watched Sarah lead her students through their opening performance, each song carefully chosen to signal different phases of their plan. The children's voices rose pure and clear. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch. Like me, the hymn was their signal that the marshal's men had been spotted approaching from Sterling City, right on schedule. Mayor Thompson stood on the makeshift stage, his festival speech dripping with false benevolence. Today we celebrate not just the harvest, but new beginnings. Our improved well, generously funded by Mr. Blackwood. His eyes found Samuel in the crowd, malice glinting behind his public smile. The storage shed loomed behind him, its weakened supports carefully hidden by festive decorations. Samuel noted how Clayton's men had positioned themselves to herd people toward it when the time came. But they weren't the only ones watching. Widows in their dark dresses formed a subtle perimeter, their presence a quiet reminder of past crimes. Sarah's students moved into their second song, a local favorite about changing seasons. Mary's clear voice carried the warning verse. Autumn winds blow cold and clear, change is coming, drawing near. Right on cue, Herbert Mason's son pointed excitedly at the well. "Pa, the water's running clear now." The crowd shifted to look, temporarily blocking Thompson's view of Samuel's position. In that moment, Mrs. Henderson's basket accidentally spilled, her quilting supplies rolling precisely where they would trip Clayton's men if they rushed forward. The festival lanterns swayed gently in the morning breeze, their positions marking the invisible battle lines. Thompson's men stayed close to the shadows they cast, not realizing how the carefully arranged lights would blind them at the crucial moment. Sarah caught Samuel's eye as she directed her students into position for their final song. She touched the columbine flower on her shawl, the signal that Mason's evidence had reached friendly hands in the territorial office. The morning wore on, each festival activity a move in their deadly chess game. Women served coffee laced with warnings instead of poison. Children played marble games that tracked the movements of Clayton's hired guns. Even the Reverend's blessing held coded meanings, his trembling hands marking time until justice arrived. Samuel felt the weight of his father's watch, its ticking matching the countdown to confrontation. Soon, the children's choir would begin their final performance. Soon, Thompson would spring his trap, not realizing he was walking into one, the harvest. Festival banner rippled overhead, its hidden messages clear to those who knew to look. Like the town itself, it displayed one face to the world, while concealing another beneath. But today would end that division. One way or another, truth would harvest what deception had sown. Samuel moved carefully through the crowd, staying in the sightlines of his allies. In less than an hour, the storage shed would become either a tomb or a testimony. Everything depended on timing, trust, and a town's courage to finally face its shadows. The poison bottle lay shattered on the festival grounds, its contents seeping harmlessly into the dirt instead of Samuel's coffee cup. Mrs. Whitaker stood frozen, her face a mask of shock as she stared at the dark liquid spreading across her skirts. Behind her, Herbert Mason's son pointed accusingly. "I saw her, Pa, just like you said to watch for the special bottle with the red string." Mason's complexion shifted from pale to ashen. His confession had included this detail, Thompson's preferred method for quiet elimination. Now his own son had exposed it before a dozen witnesses. "I trusted you," Mrs. Whitaker hissed at Mason. "We all did. Thompson promised us profit, not murder." The gathering crowd murmured darkly. Several of Mrs. Henderson's widows moved closer, their black dresses like gathering storm clouds. Years of suspicion about their husbands' deaths crystallized. In this moment of revelation, Samuel stepped forward, carefully positioning himself between Mrs. Whitaker and Clayton's approaching men. "Interesting choice of refreshment, ma'am. Perhaps we should discuss its ingredients?" "It's too late," she snarled, desperation replacing deception. "The storage shed is ready." Once the children's choir, she caught herself, but the damage was done. Sarah, who had been moving to protect her students, froze. The full scope of Thompson's plan hit her, using innocent children's songs to cover the sound of murder. Her face hardened with cold fury. "Tommy," she called sharply, "signal the others." The boy ran to the schoolhouse bell, ringing it in a pattern that sent the children scattering to predetermined positions. Each had been drilled on this moment, knowing exactly where to go and who would protect them. Thompson burst from his office, trying to regain control. A simple misunderstanding. "The festival must cover more disappearances?" Samuel's voice carried across the square. "Like Sarah's father. Like the marshal who investigated him." The mayor's mask cracked. "Clayton, handle this." But the sheriff hesitated. The crowd's mood had shifted dangerously. His hired guns were suddenly isolated, surrounded by townspeople whose fear had turned to rage. Herbert Mason stepped away from his former allies, putting an arm around his son. "No more," he declared. "Show them, boy. Show them what you found in the storage shed." The child pulled out papers, construction orders showing deliberately weakened support beams, with Thompson's signature clear at the bottom. More damning. They were dated weeks before Samuel's arrival. The trap had been planned for someone. Samuel had simply been the convenient target. "You're all accomplices now," Thompson sneered, but his voice shook. "Every one of you who stayed silent, who took our money, we kept silent out of fear," Reverend Gates called out. "But fear's grip loosens when truth comes to light." He pulled out his record of suspicious deaths, holding it high. "No more graves behind my church." The mining company representatives began backing away, wanting no part of the unfolding scandal. Their retreat was cut off by the arrival of women from the Widows' Network, each carrying evidence of their husbands' mysterious ends. Samuel watched the conspirators' unity crumble. Mrs. Whitaker was sobbing, naming names. Mason clutched his son like a shield against retribution. Only Clayton's eyes remained dangerous, his hands still too close to his guns. Sarah had positioned herself by the well, its clean water a testament to change. "Choose now," she called out. "Choose truth, or share their fate when justice arrives." The sound of approaching horses emphasized her words. The marshal's men were nearly here, summoned by Mason's confession and the evidence they'd smuggled. Out. Thompson looked around wildly, seeing his carefully constructed power structure collapse. His gaze fixed on the storage shed, his last desperate plan still in play. "The choir!" he shouted. "Get them in position!" But the children were already safe, protected by a network of people finally brave enough to stand against corruption. The Harvest Festival's careful choreography had become a dance of justice, its steps leading not to murder, but to redemption. The festival lantern in Sarah's hand cast shifting shadows across the town square as sunset painted the sky blood red. Its light caught the desperation in Thompson's eyes as he backed toward the storage shed, his last trap on triggers, his power slipping away like water through cupped hands. "Stay back!" The mayor's veneer of sophistication had cracked entirely. "Clayton, shoot anyone who moves!" But the sheriff's men were surrounded by townspeople now. The Widows' Network had positioned themselves strategically, their dark dresses hiding the glint of borrowed rifles. Mrs. Henderson's quiet voice carried across the square. "My Frank died for your secrets. My son won't." Samuel moved forward, deliberately, his father's watch marking each step. "It's finished, Thompson. The marshal's already reading Mason's confession. The mining company representatives have fled. There's nowhere left to hide the truth." "Truth?" Thompson laughed wildly. "The truth is, I built this town. I controlled every drop of water, every ounce of ore, every worthless life." He pulled a revolver, swinging it between Samuel and Sarah. "And I can tear it all down." Sarah's lantern. Light steadied, highlighting the unstable support beams of the storage shed behind Thompson. One shot could still trigger the collapse they'd planned, burying evidence and innocence alike. "Put down the gun," Samuel said quietly. "Sarah's father made the same discovery we did. The mining claims were falsified. The territorial office has proof now. Her father was a fool." Thompson's finger tightened on the trigger. "Just like you, thinking you could change things. People don't want change. They want to be controlled." "No," the word came from Herbert Mason's son, standing brave beside his father. "We want the truth, like Miss Collins taught us." A shot cracked across the square. Clayton had finally chosen a side, the wrong one. His bullet splintered the lantern in Sarah's hand, plunging that corner into darkness. She dropped and rolled as Samuel had taught her, taking cover behind the well's new stonework. The brief chaos was all Thompson needed. He darted into the storage shed, shouting for Clayton to finish his work. The sheriff raised his gun again, but Mrs. Henderson was faster. Her first shot as a widow struck true, dropping Clayton before he could fire. "Samuel!" Sarah's voice cut through the confusion. "The support beams." Thompson was trying to trigger the collapse manually, desperate to bury the evidence of his crimes. Samuel rushed forward as the first beam cracked, its sound like breaking bones. The lantern, though broken, had started a small fire. Its flames illuminated the interior just enough to see Thompson wrestling with the rigged supports, his fine clothes coated in dust from decades of buried secrets. "All these years," Samuel said, advancing carefully, "all these deaths, For what? Power over a small town? Power is power, Thompson snarled. What else matters? He raised his gun one final time. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Thompson's went wild, striking the last weakened beam. Samuel's found its mark. The shed groaned ominously. Sarah appeared in the doorway. The children found the marshal's men. They're nearly here. Samuel grabbed the strongbox containing Thompson's records as the structure began to collapse. They cleared the doorway just as the roof fell. Decades of corruption finally crushed under its own weight. In the dusty aftermath, lantern light revealed the full tableau. Clayton lay wounded, but alive, surrounded by the widows he'd helped create. Mason hugged his son, while Reverend Gates led a prayer of thanksgiving. Mrs. Whitaker sobbed out her confession to the newly arrived marshal. And there, illuminated by the combined light of dozens of lanterns held by townspeople no longer afraid of the dark, Samuel and Sarah stood beside the well that had started it all. Clean water flowed freely, just as truth now flowed through Mercy Creek. Your father would be proud, Samuel said softly. Sarah touched the columbine flower on her shawl, now dust-covered but intact. He always said truth finds its way to the surface. Like water through stone, the marshal's handcuffs gleamed in the last light of day as they closed around Thompson's wrists, their click echoing with finality across the festival grounds. The former mayor stood silent now, his authority stripped away like the festival banners that had hidden his crimes. You'll want to see this, Miss Collins, the marshal said, producing a leather-bound journal from his saddlebag. Found it in Sterling City, just where Mason's confession said it would be. Your father's last report. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the journal, its pages heavy with the truth she'd sought for so long. He knew, she whispered, about the mining claims, the water rights, all of it, and paid for that knowledge with his life. Samuel added gently, but his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Around them, justice manifested in many forms. Clayton sat slumped against the jail wall, watched by the widows whose husbands he'd helped murder. Mrs. Whitaker wrote out her confession, naming dates and victims with shaking hands. Herbert Mason held his son close, whispering explanations and apologies that would take years to complete. The marshal moved methodically, recording evidence and testimony. Each piece added weight to the charges: conspiracy, murder, corruption, spanning more than a decade. The handcuffs passed from person to person as the conspirators were formally arrested. The territorial judge will want to see this, the marshal said, examining the strongbox from the shed. Multiple counts of premeditated murder, land fraud, water rights manipulation. They'll hang for this. Reverend Gates stepped forward, his conscience finally unburdened. I'll testify to all of it. The graves behind the church, the falsified records, every death I blessed while knowing the truth. Samuel watched Sarah as she read her father's journal, noting how each page seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. He didn't abandon us, she said softly. He was trying to protect us when he sent us east. He knew they'd kill him for what he'd discovered. The children had emerged from their safe hiding places, gathering around their teacher. Mary tugged at Sarah's skirt. Does this mean we can keep learning about geology now, without being afraid? Sarah knelt beside her student, tears and smile mingling. Yes, dear one, knowledge doesn't have to hide anymore. As night fell, lanterns illuminated a transformed town square. The festival decorations hung limp and forgotten, but a different kind of celebration was building. Mrs. Henderson organized food for the marshal's men. Farmers who'd suffered under Thompson's water restrictions shared plans for expanding their fields. The Widows' Network began discussing how to help each other claim their husbands' stolen properties. It will take time, Samuel said, watching the activity. Healing always does. But the poison's been drawn out, Sarah replied, like your well drew the contamination from our water. The marshal approached them one last time, holding Thompson's ledger. The territorial office will want to speak with both of you. This case will have ripples across the territory. Samuel nodded, his father's watch marking this moment of transition. Mercy Creek can be an example now, of justice served, of truth restored. Of courage, Sarah added, looking at her students. It took children to teach us adults about bravery. The handcuffed conspirators were led away to await transport to Sterling City. Thompson walked with his head down, decades of power reduced to the shuffle of chained feet. Clayton stared straight ahead, already planning his defense. The others simply looked relieved, as if arrest had freed them from a greater prison of lies. As the dust settled, Samuel and Sarah stood by the well. Clean water flowed freely, its sound a chorus of renewal. Tomorrow would bring challenges, properties to restore, wrongs to right, trust to rebuild. But tonight, justice had finally found its way to Mercy Creek. The marshal's handcuffs had done more than restrain the guilty. They had unlocked the town's future. Like Sarah's father's journal, they were artifacts of truth's triumph over deception, of light pushing back darkness, of mercy itself returning to Mercy Creek. The new town charter lay open on what had once been Thompson's desk, its fresh ink declaring the rebirth of Mercy Creek. Each line reflected weeks of careful discussion, every clause designed to prevent the abuses of the past. Samuel studied the signatures at the bottom, a mix of rough farmers' scrawls and educated script, united in purpose if not penmanship. The water rights are officially redistributed, Sarah announced, setting down another stack of documents. Every farm will have fair access now. She touched the charter's embossed seal. Father would have appreciated the poetry. Justice flowing like water. The office itself had been transformed. Gone were Thompson's crystal decanters and propaganda. Paintings. In their place hung children's drawings of the well project and maps showing the equitable distribution of resources. Light streamed through newly washed windows that no longer hid secrets. Mrs. Henderson's organizing the property. Returns, Samuel said. Amazing how many deeds Thompson had stored for safekeeping in that strongbox. The widows' network had become a force for reconstruction. Their black dresses now a symbol of authority rather than mourning. They supervised the return of stolen lands, managed fair water distribution, and ensured that no family went hungry. During the transition, outside, the sound of construction marked progress on new projects. Farmers whose lands had withered under Thompson's restrictions were digging irrigation channels. The well's clean water fed a growing network of pipes designed by Samuel and built by men eager to right past wrongs. The mining company sent another letter, Sarah mentioned, sorting through correspondence. They're still hoping to negotiate rights, Samuel smiled. They can negotiate with the whole town now, everything above board, every profit shared fairly. The schoolhouse had become a center of civic engagement. Sarah's geology lessons expanded into classes on water management and civil governance. Her students took pride in teaching their parents about aquifers and water tables, democratic principles, and civic responsibility. Tommy Henderson's quite the parliamentarian, she noted proudly. He's organized the children into a junior town council. They're learning proper governance while the adults do the same. The transformation went beyond paperwork and politics. Mercy Creek's physical appearance reflected its moral renewal. Fresh paint replaced peeling facades. Gardens flourished with reliable water access. The church bell rang freely now that Reverend Gates no longer feared calling attention to his conscience. Herbert Mason, working to rebuild trust, had turned his accounting skills to public benefit. His ledgers now tracked community improvements and shared resources rather than concealing theft. His son helped him check the math, their shared work part of their healing. The territorial judge was impressed with our new charter, Samuel commented, reviewing reports. Says it could be a model for other towns. Sarah nodded, adjusting the fresh flowers on her desk. Columbines, naturally. Several families inquired about moving here. They've heard about our water system and school. And our commitment to justice, Samuel added. Word spreads. The marshal had kept his promise to help them set things right. Every few weeks, riders brought more recovered documents and restored property. Each delivery helped heal another wound. In the community's fabric, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway. The Farmers' Council is ready to discuss the harvest planning, and Mary's mother baked a pie to thank you both for everything. Such gifts appeared regularly now, not as bribes, but as genuine expressions of gratitude and community. The town was learning a new way of relating based on mutual support rather than fear and control. Samuel checked his father's watch, its steady ticking now marking progress rather than countdown to conflict. "Shall we, Miss Collins?" Sarah gathered the relevant papers, pausing to straighten the charter on its display stand. The documents, final clause, caught the afternoon light. "Let truth flow like water through the veins of our town, nurturing justice, feeding hope, and washing clean the sins of the past." Together they headed to the meeting, walking streets where children played freely and neighbors greeted each other without fear. Mercy Creek was living up to its name at last, proving that, like the well water itself, truth could cleanse even the deepest corruption. The wedding ring caught the last sunlight of day as Samuel held it out to Sarah, its gold band simple but meaningful. They stood by the well that had started everything, its clean water flowing as steadily as their shared commitment to justice. "I came to Mercy Creek looking for a wife," Samuel said softly, "but found so much more. A partner in truth, a defender of right, a teacher of courage." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she recognized the ring's design, a delicate pattern of columbines, like those she'd used to mark her warnings. "You remembered every detail," he smiled. "Just as I'll remember how you chose to stay and fight rather than flee. How you taught children to be braver than their parents. How you never lost faith in justice." Around them, the town had gathered quietly, drawn by Mrs. Henderson's discreet signals. The widows' network stood together, their dark dresses now adorned with colorful shawls that spoke of mourning, giving way to hope. "Some of Thompson's men finally confessed," Herbert Mason announced, his son proud at his side. They've found your father's remains, Miss Collins. He'll have a proper burial now, with honor." Sarah touched the ring, her voice steady despite her tears. "He always said that truth finds its way to the surface, like water through stone, like love through fear," Samuel added, taking her hand. "Will you help me build something here, Sarah? Not just wells and schools, but a legacy of justice?" "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, with the strength that had faced down corruption, "Yes." The cheer that went up from the gathered townspeople scattered birds from the church roof. "Reverend." Yates beamed, his conscience finally as clean as the water that flowed through their reformed town. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with a bouquet of columbines. "We've been planning this for weeks," she admitted, "ever since you two showed us that love and justice can bloom even in poisoned soil." Mary and Tommy led the other children in singing the hymns that had once been signals of resistance, their young voices now carrying joy instead of warning. The songs floated over a town transformed, gardens blooming with reliable water, houses freshly painted, streets free of lurking threats. Samuel slipped his father's watch from his pocket. "One last time. I kept this as a reminder of legacy," he said, showing Sarah the inscription inside. "Truth endures. Now it's a promise. To you, to this town, to the future we'll build together." As sunset painted Mercy Creek in gold, the couple stood, surrounded by their adopted family. Reformed sinners, brave widows, innocent children, all bound together by their shared triumph over corruption. The well's flowing water provided gentle accompaniment to their celebrations, its sound a hymn of redemption. The school bell rang out joyfully across Mercy Creek, its clear tone announcing not the start of lessons, but the beginning of Samuel and Sarah's wedding ceremony. The bell that had once warned of danger now celebrated hope, its voice carrying across flourishing fields and bustling streets. Children lined the path to the church, scattering columbine petals where conspirators had once lurked in shadows. Mary led them, wearing her best dress and the proud smile of one who had helped justice triumph. Tommy Henderson walked beside her, carrying a small cushion with 2 rings that bore matching engravings. Truth flows like water. Inside the church, the transformation was complete. Sunlight streamed through windows that had witnessed secret meetings and hidden crimes, now illuminating pews filled with witnesses to love and redemption. The widows' network had traded their black dresses for colors as bright as the garden flowers they'd arranged at every corner. Herbert Mason sat with his son, both wearing new suits that represented their fresh start. The boy clutched his father's hand, no longer afraid of asking questions or seeking truth. Behind them, farmers whose lands now flourished under fair water. Wrights nodded in appreciation of the couple who had made it possible. Reverend Gates stood at the altar, his conscience as clear as his voice when he began the ceremony. We gather today not just to unite 2 hearts, but to celebrate the triumph of light over darkness, of truth over deception, of love over fear. Sarah walked down the aisle alone, carrying a bouquet of columbines. But she wasn't truly alone. Every step was accompanied by the love of her students, the respect of the townsfolk, and the vindicated spirit of her father. Samuel waited for her, his father's watch marking not time, but heritage now, its inscription a promise kept. When they joined hands, it symbolized more than a marriage. It represented the union of courage and justice, of education and progress, of past wounds healed and future hope secured. The school bell rang once more as they exchanged their vows, its sound carrying across a town reborn. Through the church windows they could see the well flowing freely, its water catching sunlight like scattered diamonds, a testament to what truth and determination could accomplish. Mercy Creek had found its redemption, and in this wedding celebrated its own new beginning. 1 year later, a family portrait hung in Mercy Creek's new town hall, capturing more than just Samuel and Sarah Blackwood. In the background stood the well that had sparked revolution, its waters now feeding flourishing farms for miles around. Sarah's students clustered around the couple, their bright faces reflecting the confidence of children raised on truth rather than fear. The widows' network stood proud in their colorful dresses, while Herbert Mason and his son shared a genuine smile. Even Reverend Gates' normally solemn expression had softened with contentment, but most telling was the small bundle in Sarah's arms, their newborn daughter, named Grace. Like the clean water flowing through Mercy Creek's veins, she represented hope renewed and legacy redeemed. Behind them all, the town charter gleamed in its frame, its promises kept, its truth flowing as steady as the well water that had washed a community clean. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.